Macedonia did a 50th, and this is a video I wanted to make for a while, and this time it's on the history of fighting games. Now, what I mean by fighting games, I'm on about a specific type of fighting game here. So the type of fighting game we're talking about here is one where you play as a specific character, but most of the computer opponents are unplayable characters. If that makes any sense. So there might be like 3 different people you can play as, but there's about 10 opponents in the game you have to face, but you cannot play as any of them. So all the games on this list basically fall into that category, and I'm doing them in the first time they came out, because the very first of the fighting games were made pretty much started like this. And the first one we're seeing right now, is the very first game to feature this sort of way of playing a game, and probably one of the earliest fighting games on arcades in general, and that's the Great Swordsman. As you might be able to see, interesting enough, it's a fencing game. Now, you could say it's a fencing game, it doesn't 100% stay like a fencing game. If you get far enough in this game, you get to players like Gladiators and other stuff, and you basically have to memorise the patterns of your opponent by, well, hitting their weak spots, pretty much. It's actually kind of an entertaining game. It's a pretty old game, this one, and it's one of those games that doesn't have any continue features, so if you die, there's actually 4 different worlds to the game, but I'm not very good at the game. I can't barely get past one. There's definitely some strategy involved in this game. It's not just button bashing, that's for sure. There's definitely nothing like special moves as such, but it's unsurprising that these are a game from 1984, but yeah, this one's actually a surprisingly good game, and I'm pretty sure there's not many actual fencing games out there, so if you want to play a decent old fencing game, this is a really pretty good choice as well. It doesn't 100% stay a fencing game, and it's got surprisingly some alright voice samples as well for the time it came out. But yeah, if you do really die in the game, you have to start from the beginning every time, even if you get to like the second themed world, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, that was Great Swordsman. That was. The next game was published by Data East, and it's called Shanghai Kid, and yeah, you play as a kung fu guy. The game, interesting enough, starts with a moveset thing on a timer. The problem is, I have problems with this game in general, is you have to hit certain targets of your opponent's body to do more damage, and they have a weakness too. But the controls are, dare I say, very complex for what they need to be. It makes hitting anyone kind of hard in the game, and so yeah, this definitely isn't one of the best games Data East ever published. It's a very early fighting game, so you can't really bash it that much, but yep, so that's one done. Right, so next up was Typhoon Gal, and this one you just play as a, well, I'm guessing a schoolgirl who dresses up as in a gi, and you just have to, well, I think you're doing judo. I'm not a martial art expert. Anyway, the main aim of the game is you have to keep pushing the enemies, and eventually just throw them out of the ring you're in. They can throw you too, though, so you gotta be careful. I'd say this was more fun to play than the other game. I mean, you can actually feels like you're actually doing something right in this game, but I don't know, the controls don't feel 100% responsive. Also, I'm pretty sure this was pretty much going to be the first female protagonist in a fighting game you could actually play as. So it's got that going for it, I guess. Next up is Ya Kung Fu by Konami, and this one's a pretty well-known game. Well, compared to the previous two, I mean, this one was ported to a lot of systems. Now, this one has way better controls than the previous mentioned games. This one, actually, the controls are very easy to figure out. You have a punch and a kick button, and you just move a direction to do a punch in that position and all that. There's like weird special move you can do. this game's more about strategy than anything else. You basically have to, certain enemies have certain weaknesses, so you have to basically learn them to get through this one. There's absolutely no checkpoints in the game or way to like continue playing either. If you die, you start from the beginning again. This is going to be common for these early games in this video. I've never actually beaten the game. The furthest I've ever got is the 10th opponent, which is the final opponent. I've just never beaten him. But yeah, this is a tough game, but it's a fun one. Interesting enough, the Game Boy Advance version of this game has an extra background and 2 extra characters in the game. You have to put the Konami code in to unlock it for some reason, but another strange thing about that mode is it had a link cable option, so if you had 2 copies of the game, you could actually play the game two players, which is something the original game didn't have. So yes, you could actually play as the enemies in the game, but that's an exclusive feature only for that version of the game, along the extra characters. So yeah, Kung Fu's a pretty fun one. I definitely recommend playing this one. And later in the same year, Konami released Galactic Warriors. Now this one's actually got a lot of firsts for the entire fighting game genre in general. I mean, first of all, you've got alternating movesets. You've got special moves in this game. While it does not work like Street Fighter, like you can put a combination in, you have basically a button at the bottom of the screen that lets you switch to a different attack. You also got a regular like punch and a jump and all that. So you start the game with you pick one of your 3 playable robots, and you just have to literally just see how long you can last against the AI. This is just like Kung Fu, all this one's actually got less opponents in the game. Interesting of both of these games, the final boss is literally just a reskin of you. But when you beat this one, all the opponents get an extra move. You get an extra move as well, depending what character you're playing as. So yeah, this game did a lot of firsts. I mean, it's probably the first robot-based fighting game ever made. It's definitely the first one with special moves. There's actually, well, not really combos as such, but yep, it's actually got levels where you can fly, which is another first for the genre. You can actually block projectiles in this game because you've got a shield, so you can take air attacks and that. This game did a lot of firsts. It's surprising how forgotten it is these days. No one ever talks about it, but probably because it never released on anything. It's a pretty obscure game, which is strange. It's also fairly easy to beat. I mean, there's definitely some, just like Kung Fu, there's a certain strategy to beat every opponent, and once you figure them out, the game becomes fairly easy-ish. Though I must admit, the game seems a lot harder playing as a the female robot than the female robot that does the other 2 characters. And maybe that's just me, maybe because of the awful different movesets they've got. Next up is Gladiator. Now, this one doesn't start like a straightforward fighting game. I mean, you have to walk forwards and avoid loads of projectiles with a shield. If you waggle the joystick like crazy, he turns into like a super barrier, which basically just blocks all projectiles. That's a hint for if you want to play this game. The game has like weaknesses to certain opponents. Like if you hit a certain opponent in like a certain body part, they'll instantly lose. So there's some memorization in this. Also, the game reminds me of that game that came out about a while after this called China Warrior on the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16. That plays very similar to this with big sprites and all. I think this plays considerably better than that game, even though that game was made 2 years after, I think. Also, in the Japanese version of this game, the female warrior in the game, yeah, you can actually make her topless by knocking her arm off, but they censored that outside Japan. Pointless fact, but I don't think this game's one of my favourites. I mean, it's kind of pretty difficult. It's not easy to figure out how to do stuff, but that's Gladiator. Next we've got Kageki Fists of Steel, and another game by Taito. Now, I'm not really the biggest fan of this one, cause there's, well, I don't mind actually the graphics of the game and the weird looking, like ugly deformed looking people. That's the best description I can give of it. You fight multiple opponents in a stage, but the reason why I don't really like this one is there's no moves in this game whatsoever. You've basically got a punch and that's it. Basically the only way you seem to actually do any good is you get to a certain position of the opponent and just hammer punch and just keep moving all the time until you get in that position. That's the only way you can really beat people in this game. In other words, it's very limited. I mean, compared to the previous games we mentioned, there's barely any moves in this whatsoever. I mean, you've got a punch and that's it. Yeah, I don't really recommend this one that much. It has a Mega Drive version as well, which you guessed it is the exact same, just a worse looking version of the arcade version. I really would not recommend this one. Next up is a game that I'm pretty sure most people have heard of, and it's the original Street Fighter. Not many people talk about the original Street Fighter because, well, frankly, it's not that good of a game, to be honest. The game's incredibly unfair at times. I mean, there's one I think the opponent Eagle in the game can kill you in 4 hits, no matter what it hits you with. The game originally in arcade had like these weird like pressure pads to it. They had to hit a different things to do different damage things. They actually got rid of them eventually because people were injuring themselves on them, and it was a stupid idea as well. Special moves are pretty much non-existent, and well, you guess you can do an Hadouken, but pulling it off just by it's pretty much pure luck. It's meant to be just like some secret in this game that doesn't work all the time. There's also the fact that everyone forgets about Street Fighter 1 is you only play as Ryu. You don't play as anyone else. Yeah, if you play as the second player, he plays Ken, but that's it. They're the only 2 characters in the game you can play as. Everybody forgets. Now, quite a few characters from Street Fighter 1 ended up making it into the later games. Bizarrely enough, the one that confuses the most is Birdie because he changed his entire skin colour next time he appears in the series. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Yeah, the original Street Fighter was also released on multiple consoles at the time. Confusing enough, the PC Engine and TurboGrafx version was renamed Fighting Street for some reason. Don't know why, but it was. All I can say, yeah, this one's it's amazing the game got a sequel after this one, because this one's not very good really, to be honest. Also, the voice samples are actually pretty hilarious in the game. Next is Last Apostle Puppet Show, or Raikai Doshi, or Chinese Exorcist. This is a really odd one, and this is another game that's the first for the fighting game genre and the first for most games in general. This was pretty much the first game ever with use the same kind of like pre-rendering technique games that Mortal Kombat use, because all the character models in this are scanned in like puppets or stop motion models. This was pretty much the first game ever to do it, I believe. Unfortunately, the game itself is completely unfair. I mean, it's only one player, and you just play as a guy, and you just run around kicking some Chinese zombies, Chinese zombies. They're probably vampires with jiangxis. That's what they call their vampires. The game itself is incredibly difficult, and it's not a very fair game. It's one of those unfair type of fighting games. And every time you die, you might notice your head hilariously falls off, which looks pretty hilarious. It's surprisingly difficult. They know the game's unbalanced because the game, if you actually lose a round to someone, you just lose a life, and they don't get a health back. So it's obviously designed like this on purpose, and while it's got some historical importance, this game, the game itself, gameplay-wise, is kind of to be honest. So the next one is Kabuki Z. Now this is style-wise, this one kind of confusing. I mean, you play as a samurai with a very weird walking animation. I say walking animation, even look like he's walking, looks like he's just sliding on the ground. This is definitely the first gory game in this list. Yeah, it's got dead bodies in it, everything explodes and it pulls up blood, just decapitations in it. Yeah, Strangely enough, the game's a very confusing setting to it though, because yeah, you're supposed to be a samurai, but you end up fighting a medieval knight in the game. I'm not sure what the plot of this game is. Well, there isn't one. You just slide around, just whack things with a sword, and then occasionally you get to a boss, and that's where the fighting game sort of aspect comes into it. Because they have, just like games like Yakuza, they have a weakness, and you have to hit them at a certain time to deal damage to them. Interesting enough, when you're nearly dead, your sword actually starts flashing red, or is that meant to be blood? I don't know. It's kind of odd. There's some pretty weird things in this game, though. I mean, yeah, just like one of the levels starts with you just slashing away at, like some like weird caveman person. Then well, he literally explodes and two female ninjas just leap out of his chest. I mean, yeah, the guy had two fully grown women living inside him. Yeah, it's one of those kind of games. Next up is Hippodrome, or Fighting Fantasy. Now this one has some interesting features which is definitely new, such as you can actually purchase items and weapons in this game. Basically the fight money you get for every stage you clear, it gives you extra money. And these weapons have different abilities. Some do more damage, but have less range, but they have different stats. This is definitely one of the first fighting games, I believe, to have multiple stats in the game. For weapons. One thing I will note about this game is that if you're basically stuck with a weapon, there's no way to like go and rebuy it. You have to start the entire game again. You can only ever get extra money out if you clear the stage. There's no retrying gives you extra money or anything like that in this game, so this is actually a fun game. I've never had beaten it, but just like games like Yakuza, everything has a pattern in this game, so with some practice you could actually beat this game, to be honest. You just have to memorise the enemy's patterns. It's also only 8 stages long, so it's actually shorter than Yakuza, which is 10. But yeah, this is a fun game. To be honest, I'd dare say it's worth playing. Next up is Street Smart by SNK. And yeah, this is another one-on-one fighting game. You can actually play with 2 players at once, but you can only really fight one person at a time. Basically, you just fight some really powerful people who take 1 billion hits to die. It's not really a bad game as such, and the problem, it's not like the mechanics are bad. The problem is you have no clue how strong an opponent is because they have no health bars whatsoever. It's really hard to judge if he damages them or not. Well, you have to tell when you're hitting them because they keep falling over, but you have no clue how much health they've got left, which is kind of frustrating. To be honest. I mean, you only know when they're nearly dead when they start flashing red, but that's not straight away. One thing I find kind of amusing about this game is when you beat someone, a hospital comes and picks them up. Well, obviously the hospital's literally called SNK Hospital. Yeah, SNK have their own hospital apparently, according to this game. It's not essentially a bad game, but it's not perfect to say at the least. Next up is Pit Fighter. Now, I'm sure most people know what Pit Fighter is. It's pretty infamous these days. It's laughed at as a really bad game. Well, at the time of the release, it looked graphically amazing, but all the console ports really couldn't handle the arcade graphics and looked incredibly, dare I say, ugly. Also, some of them had stupid design things like the Super Nintendo were not having continues in it whatsoever, so it was insanely difficult to beat. Yeah, this was pretty much the very first fighting game with pre-rendered with live action actors pre-rendered into it. Control wise, yeah, I don't think this game really plays very well, to be honest. You just punch people and you just knock them into the. There's some interesting ideas, like you can pick objects and throw and use weapons and stuff and throw them at people and things, but the computer can also use these as well. And the computer, unsurprisingly, always has a bigger health bar than you all the time. Also, the opponents you fight don't look very menacing. There's also the strange factor, which there are design choices for some reason, that most of the crowd is black and white. I mean, why are most of the crowd black and white? Somehow I'll never understand about this game, that, but they just are, aren't they? And strange enough, when you beat someone, when someone dies, someone gets beaten up, they also turn black and white. Yeah, Pitfire's a pretty infamous game. It's one of them games that class is really good at the time, but it's one of them games that hasn't held up very well. For added hilariousness, go play the PS2 version of Midway Arcade Treasures 2 of this game, because the developer of it, Backbone, somehow messed up on the speed of the game. So it plays twice as fast as it's meant to play. So it's like playing Pit Fighter Turbo Edition. It's pretty strange, but it's true. Next up is Fatal Fury, King of Fighters by SNK. Now the Fatal Fury series is pretty much well known because, well, it's got some history behind it, that's for sure. The characters in it have since this game anyway. It's just this game was actually worked on by the person who actually created the original Street Fighter 1. They actually left Capcom and made this. So that's something to mention. Yeah, and this game's innovations at the time was you've got two different planes in the game, so you can jump back and forth between two different planes to dodge attacks. Doesn't always work all the time, but that's what it is, so yeah. Obviously it's a short review, but it's Fatal Fury. Most people have heard of this one. Next up is Ultraman, which is based off the very long running Japanese TV show Ultraman. And you know what Ultraman is? You play as a guy called Ultraman, or is it Ultramen? I don't know. Well, whatever. He's basically just a giant. He's like the Japanese version of Superman, kind of. He's basically an alien from a planet, and he just fights monsters that are Godzilla sized. And how you play this game is you get basically a monster shows up, and you basically have to wear the monster down and wait until it's got 0 health left, and then do a finisher move to clear the stage. I thought the thing where this gets sort of annoying is that the monster's health constantly goes up, so you can't just. So you have to keep wearing it down, and you have to wait till you can charge up your finisher to beat him. Now, this game gets a lot of slack. Well, specifically the Super Nintendo version of this game gets a lot of slack, but for the mechanics of it. I don't think the mechanics are absolutely horrendous. Yeah, they're not perfect, and it'd be better if the silly finisher bar, you have to beat a finisher, made more sense and didn't get health back, but outside of that, I don't think this game's as horrendous as people think it is. Also, we do like this game. The Mega Drive version of this game is pretty much the part of this arcade one. Look pretty much almost the same, but it has a few different monsters to fight in the arcade version. And the Super Nintendo version also plays the exact same and has entirely different monsters altogether. So if you like this game, yeah, there's basically like 2 other versions of it. So yeah, that's Ultraman. So next up is King of the Monsters 2, The Next Thing, the sequel to the original King of the Monsters. Now the sequel altered things around a bit from the original. The original was more of a pure fighting game, with wrestling moves of all things. The sequel, well, still has like a pure fighting game mode. The main mode now is a multiplayer. Is a single. Well, it's actually two players at once mode. Way to fight a bunch of superpowered unplayable monsters. And that's why it's on this list. There's only 3 characters to pick in this one compared to the original game had 6. Which is kind of interesting that they downgraded the amount of characters, but they did so. You have all the bosses have a life bar in the game, and they're very difficult to beat. This is definitely a quarter muncher game. There's no way you could beat this game in credit ever. I mean, the AI is very cheap. You have lives in the game, and the health of the opponents does not actually go up if you continue or you lose a life either. But basically, just run around, just destroy a few random enemies, and then you fight a big monster at the end of the levels. Or you can do it with 2 people at once to fight the same monster. Or you can just fight each other if you want. There's some great monster designs though, that's one thing you can give this game credit for. Interesting enough, if you play the actual Mega Drive version of this game, or the Genesis version of this game, it plays more like the very first King of the Monsters game. So you've only got 1 character, so you can actually play as everyone in that version. Though for some reason they removed the final boss from the game. It still appears on the game over screen though, mind you. Which is kind of weird and dumb, but oh well. Next up is Art of Fighting, another SNK fighting game. From another game series that ended up becoming much bigger. As we might have guessed, yeah, Art of Fighting and Fatal Fury basically all combined together to make the King of Fighters series. So essentially that game was originally a giant crossover game, but then became the main series. Yeah, kind of confusing, but that's what happened. Well anyway, so what do you do with Art of Fighting? You just play as 3 people. And well, this one's claimed to fame at times having scaling effects. So the background zooming in and out was an impressive effect at the time, and having large sprites. Another interesting feature this one has, which not many other sprite-based fight games have, is the characters' faces actually get damaged in pure fight. So yeah, you're punching them all the time. Eventually, the face will get bruises. It's kind of an interesting idea, and it kind of works in this game, though sometimes the bruises disappear when they do a wind torn, which makes no sense, but it's not a feature that many sprite-based games ever had, to be honest. I'm not talking about one, but I really suck at the game and not very good at it whatsoever, but there's no surprise there. Yeah, Art of Fight is pretty much called a classic in some parts. It's also the reason the character Dan Hibiki exists in Street Fighter, because Capcom thought Art of Fighting was a funny game and they thought to make a game, character making fun of it. To be serious, that's literally what that character's origin pretty much is. So there you go. Next up is Monster Maulers by Konami in 1993. Now this definitely looks, you can definitely tell even by just visually looking at this game, this is a 90s Konami arcade game. It's got that same style of music all their games had at the time, and just the colouring and the sprite work just screamed 1990s Konami arcade game. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but yeah, the plot of this one is some evil people just drop a bunch of monsters down on a planet for some reason. So this one you play as up 1 or 2 players at once, and you basically fight a superpowered boss opponent. Now the bosses are interesting because a lot of them are references to other things. I mean, one of them's a reference to the boss is the Brain Golem from Salamander or Life Force. Oh, you also fight the Easter Island Head. Just like the game like Yakum from Konami made years ago, everything has sort of like different things. There's some other interesting alterations in this one though, which Yakum didn't have. Like now they actually use this version now, because by the time it's time Street Fighter 2 are out, they actually use actual special moves in the game. And you can do things like body slam opponents and grapple them, and there's a lot more like variety moves in this game than there is in Yakum Fu. That's for sure. It's a fairly fun game. It's a pretty short game as well if you want to play through it. I mean, you can just credit spam this one. There's no punishment for losing a life. The enemy doesn't gain the health back if you continue. So this one's going to be a quick game to beat if you want to play it. But I'd say I'd recommend it. It's fun. Next up is a game which you think could have a lot of arcade games on, but nope, this is the only one that actually exists, and that's Godzilla. You may have guessed, yep, the story mode of this game you play as, strangely enough, you can only play just Godzilla. And the game starts off with a mini game where you just walk forward and just destroy a bunch of tanks, and you can't take any damage from them by the looks of it, which is pretty accurate to the movies, to be honest. But then you kind of get into like the actual opponent fighting, and that's the problem I have with this game. The combat's rubbish. I mean, I know he's supposed to be a giant monster, but Godzilla's got no range. None of the other characters you can play as in like versus mode, which is only like 6. There's actually more Godzilla monsters in the game, but you can't play as them. All the attacks you've got really short range. You've got this tiny little punch and a tiny little kick, but barely has any range. So basically the entire mechanics of the game is just like picking people up and throwing them. And I can never figure out how to do the atomic fire breath or a super move, even though it flashes at the bottom screen going, hit this button. I could never figure it out. I don't know, the controls are really clunky. It should have been good, this, but yeah, it's just yet another bad Japanese developed Godzilla game, unfortunately. Next up is Metamoqester. Now this one's definitely never left the arcade, but you've got 3 different playable characters. You've got, just like Monster Balls, this one has simultaneous 2 players at once. Unlike Monster Maulers, this one is considerably harder. I mean, if you actually do lose a fight, lose all lives, you have to start again. So this one's going to be a lot tougher to beat singly than it is the other game. Because there's no checkpoints, all the health comes back if you lose all your items. Yeah, it's pretty difficult, this one. The enemies are pretty powerful. It's obviously designed to be played for 2 players at once, then it's probably a lot easier. In single player, this one's kind of a nightmare to do, to be honest. There's some nice bosses design and crazy like explosion, and your characters can turn into wheels and stuff with special attacks. You do have a special bar and a special move and all that. Not very most people heard of this one, but yeah, this is definitely one that's more fun to play 2 players and it's a single player game. But yeah, that's Metamoqester. Fun game with nice graphics, but it's pretty difficult to say at the least. Next up is Megaman, the Power Battle. And this game is an interesting one. It's technically a fighting game, but in some ways it's not a fighting game. I mean, you pick one of your 3 Mega Man characters and you pick Mega Man stages based off Mega Man 1, 2, 3 or 4, or 5 and 6, or Mega Man 7 opponents. Yeah, I know it doesn't sound that interesting when you think of it that way, but also the graphics in this game are not the Super Nintendo graphics, they're being redrawn. But yeah, as you might guess, this game is essentially a boss rush game, but with Mega Man. So instead of like, so it's basically this game is like playing Mega Man minus the actual Mega Man stages. If it was just the Robot Masters at the end of the stage. All the mechanics that the original Mega Man work in this game as well. Like you're a charge shot, jump, slide. Every time you defeat an opponent, you get a new weapon. All the opponents, all the Robot Masters have different weaknesses. They're actually just the same weaknesses as the actual arcade original versions. So if you played the originals, you got a slight advantage. But yeah, this was kind of fun. It's also a really short game. Also pretty easy, to be honest. Mega Man itself is just the boss fights. By far probably one of the easiest parts of that series, to be honest. And the game got a sequel a year later called Mega Man 2: The Power Fighters. Now this one pretty much plays the same as the first one. The only difference is there's an extra character in the game called Duo, and there's obviously different Robot Masters. I think Duo's a character from Mega Man 8. It does recycle a few of the Robot Masters from the previous game, but all the things like the character weaknesses still affects it. Some other things have changed with this one. It's like when you defeat an opponent, they drop health power-ups and basic weapons to like give you extra stats. Get your weapons back up like an actual Mega Man game. Otherwise than that, yeah, this is pretty much very similar to the first one, but each character has a unique like power up, helper power up, where a robot appears. Obviously, Megaman has the robot rush, but the other characters have different ones as well. That's new. There's still 3 different like routes to go through the game, like in the previous version. This is pretty much the same. Pretty much, if you like the first game, you're gonna like this because it's pretty much more of the same thing. And next we've got Avengers in Galactic Storm. Now, this is a sequel, I suppose, to Captain America and the Avengers by Data. Wow, this game is by far the ugliest game on this list. This game is ugly. I mean, I get what they were trying to do when they made this game. There was going for like a pre-rendered Donkey Kong Country like look for it. But the game looks hideous. I mean, this game just does not look very good at all. I mean, yeah, ugly game. And just this one has things like assists and stuff. You can summon assist characters to help you out. I know I'm not really saying much about this one, but yeah, just look at it. It's a really ugly looking game. It's not, I don't know, it's definitely not one of my favourites. I mean, if I really wanted to play an Avengers game by Data I'd play Captain America and Avengers over this any day, pretty much. It's a far more entertaining game and better looking game than this. So the last game on this list is Red Earth or Warzard by Capcom. Now, this one has a lot of crazy features in this. This one's got 4 playable characters. And you basically fight a bunch of giant monsters in this game. It does have some interesting features though. I mean, you've got an RPG like setting in this one. You actually level up, and when your character levels up, you actually learn more attacks. So you've got Street Fighter like moves, but you also learn more attacks leveling up. And interesting enough, the game has a password system. So if you actually quit the game, you type a password in, you could start the game up again with your character at the previous level it reached with all the movesets it's got, which is an interesting feature and not many are pretty unique at the time. This game actually was literally very obscure for a long time, unfortunately, because it was released on the Capcom board that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Street Fighter 3 was on. And the problem with that board is Capcom essentially put a suicide chip in it, so the board after so long essentially started to degrade and destroy itself. This means this game took a long time to get emulated, and I don't think this game was actually emulated until... But the original Xbox and the PS2 were out a few years by the time this game was actually emulated. So yeah, and this game came out in '96, so like over 10 years it took this thing to get emulated just because of the board. Which is unfortunate, because it's actually quite a fun game. It's pretty difficult though. It's definitely, I'd call, a bit of a spammer game. You've got lots of attacks though. Some of the opponents near the end of the game are pretty cheap as well, to be honest. But yeah, it's a fun game, and it's got really nice sprite work, and it's a nice fitting end to this sort of like game type of game. So, do games like this still get made? The answer is kind of. I mean, the old characters beating up giant opponents that are really powerful is still a thing. And interesting enough, well, the last game here in this video is by Capcom. The company that still does games like this and basically made an entire genre around it is Capcom, with the Monster Hunter series. The Monster Hunter series is essentially like a 3D evolution of this genre, pretty much. You just a team just fighting a giant powerful opponent, and so yeah, the genre still kind of exists, but this is pretty much the last one that was released for arcades like it that I know of. Well, anyway, thank you for watching and listening to this video.